Chapter 4. Sandra's Story. Sandra was lying across a water trough, idly pushing small stones into a pile on the ground with a talon. He was as big and as beautiful as PJ remembered. Every so often, a wisp of smoke would trickle out from his large nostrils and he'd blow a smoke ring. The horses had taken themselves off to the opposite end of the stables. They coughed now and again and looked at Sandra accusingly. Sandra ignored them. He didn't like horses. They were too spicy for him. He much preferred the knights that rode them. The Moon Hare went hopping over to him. "Hello, Sandra," he said cheerily. Sandra gave the Moon Hare a long look. "Hello, Crumpy Flumpluff," he said lazily, pushing another stone into place. PJ looked from one to the other in surprise. "I didn't know that you knew Sandra," she said to the Moon Hare. "Of course," replied the Moon Hare. "I've known Sandra for the longest time."
"Yes, and I've known him for even longer," said Sandra.
"Sandra comes from a long line of dragons," said the Moon Hare.
"Yes," said Sandra. "My family like to queue. It's a hobby of ours." PJ looked at them. "They're as bad as each other," she muttered to herself.
"Pyjamas Ploppy Pants and me thought we'd pay you a visit, perhaps read you a story," said the Moon Hare, waving the book at Sandra.
"A book?"
Sandra sat up and his head bumped against the roof beams. He had a sudden glint in his eye.
"Does it have a dragon in it?"
"Of course," said the Moon Hare.
"And a knight? A stupid one that the dragon gets to eat at the end, who tastes of marzipan?"
"Of course," said the Moon Hare. PJ, who knew the book, wasn't sure that it did.
"Splendid," said the dragon,
curling his impressive tail around him.
"I do so like marzipan."
"Shall I read it to you then?" asked the Moon Hare, opening the book.
"Yes, please,"
said Sandra, and he lowered his head so that he could hear better. Now that he was at eye level, PJ saw how very handsome he was, with his green eyes and purple scales.
"Is she staying?" the dragon asked.
He looked slyly at PJ from under dark lashes. "Yes," said the Moon Hare, "and it's probably for the best if you don't eat her." The dragon thought for a moment.
"She can stay if she sits quietly and doesn't make smells."
"I don't make smells," said PJ crossly.
"No, yes you do," said Sandra. "I can smell you from here. You are a pooey little girl."
"Pyjamas Smelly Pants will sit very quietly and listen, and you will try your hardest not to eat her," said the Moon Hare.
"Agreed," replied the dragon.
PJ crossed her arms sulkily. "Stupid," she muttered under her breath. The Moon Hare began to read. The story was unlike any story that PJ had ever heard. In fact, she was sure that the story the Moon Hare told wasn't the story that was written in the book that he was holding. It was better. The Moon Hare seemed to cast a spell. He danced around the stables with the book in his paws, telling of brave dragons defeating and devouring foolish marzipan-tasting knights, and rude, bossy, smelly girls who wanted everything and never ended up getting their way until they learnt what manners were. It was a wonderful story, and PJ was enthralled. The dragon in the story was brave, and the knights very foolish. And as for the bossy, smelly girls, well, that part made her feel a bit uncomfortable. She didn't know why, so she tried not to think about it. Sandra was in heaven. He hadn't had a bedtime story since being in the castle. He joined in on occasions with an "absolutely" and a "bravo, brave dragon." He also insisted on seeing the pictures in the book as they went along. He didn't seem to mind at all that they didn't fit the story. When the Moon Hare had finished, they all cheered. "Oh, that was wonderful, Moon Hare," said PJ, full of admiration. "You're very clever."
"Yes, splendid, splendid," said Sandra. "I especially like the dragon parts."
"I am rather good at stories, aren't I?" said the Moon Hare. "And I know a lot about everything, don't I? Especially dragons and rude, smelly girls." And he shot a look at PJ.
I would like another story tomorrow at bedtime, said Sandra, and I'd like there to be a dragon in it, and a wandering minstrel. They taste of chocolate.